All right, good afternoon, and welcome to this edition of the MSP Success webinar series. We've got a really good one here coming today with the guys over at CyberQP. But first, a couple quick announcements here before we get into it, just as everyone's piling in. I want to make sure that everyone is taking a look at and getting registered for the upcoming MSP Marketing Roadshow. It's mspmarketingroadshow.com. We've got that coming up. I believe CyberQP is going to be there as one of our great sponsors of that show. We are going to be in Dallas in 2 weeks. We're going to be in Newark 2 weeks after that. And then about a month after, in early October, we are going to be in Las Vegas. So that's where we're going to end up in that final show. On this one that's coming up, really great stuff of where we've been seeing a lot of how with the economy, with the election year, that you're seeing things slow down, deals slow down as we're going through everything this year. Economy slowing down a little bit. And so Robin's our CEO, and that first day is going to be talking about how to add more high-value clients and cultivate those high-value clients, the ones that you really want and you brag about and everyone on your team loves. They take your advice. They do everything that you say. They're the highest profitability clients as well. That's going to be day one. Day two is super cool on it. First time that we've done this as a dedicated full day for a session. We're going to be talking about AI in sales and marketing. So what is coming up? What's new? What's working right now for using AI to get more leads, more sales faster and quicker than you can anytime in the past. There's a ton of tools. We're going to be spending a full day. We've got Mike Stadola, our CMO, is going to be leading that day, and he does a ton of work on that. We're utilizing it a lot on our side. He's going to be given that. It is a full workshop day, so you can be coming away with a ton of resources, tools that you can bring back and start leveraging AI in your sales and marketing efforts. So I'm going to post that up in the chat here just so you have it, mspmarketingroadshow.com. Make sure that you make it out there to that. For our members, it is free to attend. You just put down a deposit there to secure your spot. You get that back when you show up. For everyone else, I think it's only $99 to attend. And so super cheap to be able to get there. Look forward to seeing you there. But with this, I want to turn it over to the guys here at CyberQP. We've got Brian and Miguel are going to be on with you. I know Brian's the VP of Information Security and Compliance at CyberQP. If you've been to any of TMT's events, you always see CyberQP. They've got some of the largest presence. I was actually, guys, I pulled this. It was, unfortunately, it's the old name, but this was from our, you can't see it here, but it's got the quick pass there of the little shot glass that was
I like it.
there with the colors. So I like the new logo and everything else a whole lot better with it. But I saw that just in my background there. But you know, great supporters of MSP Success, great supporters of TMT and the TMT and Robbins community. And on today's, we're going to be talking about two of the attacks most MSPs don't know, but account for 79% of all hacking incidents. And they're going to be doing a little bit of a demo on how you avoid them, I'm sure, using CyberQP as part of that. So,
Yeah.
Brian, Miguel, I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so we'll start jumping into it. So for this presentation, a lot of what I've always believed in when building a security program, whether it's for, you know, when I was at Datto before this, now it's CyberQP, or even when I worked at some other enterprises, is knowing your enemy, right? Like a threat-informed defense is always your strongest defense, and that way you can make sure you're defending against attacks that are going to be impacting you. So again, like Jeff said, I'm Brian Milbier. Today I'm presenting with Miguel. Say hi, Miguel. Everybody. All right. So as we jump into it here, I actually did this presentation at a show a little while back, and it resonated well with folks, and it's kind of a funny one, but it's relating the art of war, so that, you know, classical book about war with cyber warfare. So what does a 2,000-year-old book have to do with cyber warfare? A lot of the principles that are in that book are still relevant today, and they still are important when we're talking about cyber warfare. So a lot of these principles around knowing your enemy, like I just discussed, deception and surprise, we see it all the time, right? With phishing and people spoofing, pretending they're calling your help desk. All those things are tactics that bad guys use, and it's very similar to old style warfare, right? With spies and deception, and going back to the Trojan horse, right? And then we also have flexibility and adaptability. You always have to be flexible. The more rigid you are, not willing to change, it allows your enemies to kind of pivot on you and exploit weakness, which is the fourth one, right? So today's presentation is going to be primarily on privileged credentials. So why privileged credentials, right? A lot of the attacks that we see, this is a report from Expel. They're a managed detection and response provider. It's the most common attack that they're seeing when defending their customers against attacks. And it's going up, right? This is the attack vector that's going up as all of you invest more and more into EDR and into endpoint protection. The bad guys are trying to pivot to figure out where they can target you and find a weakness in your defenses, and a lot of times that's on the identity side of things. We see a lot of that with phishing attacks as well. With Evil Jinx, we see this adversary in the middle. You click on a link, you log in, you didn't even realize it, but your credentials got stolen. So we'll go to the next one, IBM's threat report on the cost of the data breach. Same type of thing, right? Like they're seeing a lot of attacks coming from credentials being stolen. They see it on the rise, and that cost of a breach is still hovering right there around $5 million. The good thing I thought when I was reading this report is that the time to identify and contain a breach has actually gone down quite a bit over the last 5 years or so. It's down to 11 months. At one point, it was up near 18 months, almost 2 years. So it's good to see that the work that we're all putting into it's starting to pay off, and it's shrinking down that window when how long it takes you to identify and actually contain that breach. Next slide, please. All right, so for this one, we're going to frame it all up kind of with the MITRE ATT&CK Framework. It's a common framework. Some folks here might be aware of it. It basically is all the tactics that the bad guys use, and it kind of talks through the attack phases, and it provides a great framework for us to base this presentation on and kind of walk through what the bad guys do and help teach you guys how to defend against those threats. So this is the MITRE ATT&CK Framework here. As you can see, it starts with reconnaissance, goes all the way down through impact, exfiltration. As I mentioned on the previous slide, this is a globally accessible framework, right? They try to make it pretty easy to understand. They've got a great website on this too for you folks. I'll share it in the chat later. But it's a great resource for you to use if you're wondering like what the bad guys are up to and how you can defend against them. Understanding this is really important to building your cyber defenses, right? Because it's knowing where to defend, how to defend, what tactics are being used by attackers really helps you focus, because we don't have time to cover everything, right? So we really need to make sure we're spending our time and attention on the right things, which is why we're kind of going through this privileged access management stuff here, and we're going to talk about protecting identities. Next slide. For this one, because it is such a broad topic, we're going to try to just cover reconnaissance through privilege escalation, and we'll leave the rest of those steps, because it really depends on the business and who they're attacking. Some of those other things change depending on who they're going after. All right, so privileged account attacks. We're going to jump right into it here, starting with reconnaissance. I tried to sprinkle in quotes here from the book as well, just to try to draw those parallels. But reconnaissance is the process of gathering information about a target. So attackers tend to not just go out there blindly. There's lots of information available on the internet. So in the next slide here, we're going to jump into, you can go over here. These are some of the different tactics that people use. So this screenshot's a tool that Black Hills maintains, and it's a tool that's used to crawl LinkedIn, right? The bad guys have some similar tools. Some of them might use this, some of the threat actors. But it crawls LinkedIn and it'll tell them who works at your company and what their role is. And it really helps them understand who to target for an attack to try to get the most impact. So a lot of times they'll analyze OSINT. OSINT is open source intelligence. You know, the security world, they love acronyms and misspelled words and stuff like that. So this is one of those phrases, right? It means they'll go after socials, right? LinkedIn, other things, try to figure out who works at your business, what kind of software you folks are using. So they'll go on your company website, try to gain information there, your support pages. If you've got externally facing support pages, that helps them understand, like, where's their help desk? Like, how do customers get a hold of them? What kind of technologies are they using so they can act like they know more than they do if they call you, or if they're it also helps them with scraping information if they're going to execute attacks. Phishing campaigns, tricking users into revealing sensitive information. A lot of times people say, oh, that it's harmless, there's nothing to click in that email. But sometimes they're just trying to get you to reply and get some information from you out of those emails. And then social engineering, which goes right hand in hand with those phishing campaigns. Sometimes they do it over the phone, right? Sometimes they do it through email. There's lots of different techniques that they'll use to try to gather information about your business. So next slide. So how do you defend against this, right? Like, a lot of it for the reconnaissance phase is training, right? Making sure your employees understand what kind of information is sensitive, what they should give away, what they shouldn't give away. And then also you can implement intrusion detection. That'll kind of tell you if someone's scanning your network looking for weaknesses. And then as you're building systems, especially externally facing systems, block ports that you don't want people using, remove the X powered by headers from your servers, stuff like that. So it's, as people are scanning your network footprint, it makes it harder for them to know what technologies live in the background. Next slide, please. All right, so resource development's the next phase. This is when the bad guys start standing up, or the threat actors start standing up resources to attack you from, right? It's the preparation stage. They're really starting to get ready to attack. They're queuing everything up. Can you go ahead to the next one, please, Miguel? There we go. So this tool that's in the background here is called Evil Jinx. It's a phishing tool that you can stand up, and it lets you build websites that look exactly like the real login pages. So when they phish your users with these phishing pages, you land on it, you provide your credentials, even MFA bypass, right? Like you multi-factor in, they're going to steal that session cookie, which we'll get into a little bit later, and they can gain access to your system. So this is actually when we ran a script here to start up the fishlet, they call it, for O365. So we're standing up a fake website that looks like an O365 login, and you can customize it. So if you guys have your login pages customized, then the bad guys can look at those login pages and they can still copy them and try to make it look branded or whatever. But in this stage too, sometimes they'll stand up false identities. They'll build fake email addresses, fake social media personas. They'll any servers, anything that they need to stand up, they'll start preparing in this phase. All right. So how can you defend against that? Domain monitoring is a good one, right? Like, a lot of these folks will do what's called typo squatting. Well, we're cyber QP, they'll do cyber PQ, they'll try to, maybe they'll use an O instead of a Q. They'll do different techniques to try to make it look like you're going to a legitimate domain that's related to the business. But when people read it quick, they don't recognize that it's misspelled. So that's called typo squatting. So one thing you can do is you can do domain monitoring and look for, there's tools out there like DNS Twist, and there's some other ones that let you scan your domains to see if anyone stood up a domain that's very similar to your company's domain. Usually that's a good indicator that someone's getting ready to trigger an attack on you. And then you can also protect against subdomain takeover. That's when you have like an old subdomain out there. You might have stood up for a project or something you're working on, and you forgot about it and you stopped using it. And the bad guys can grab that cloud infrastructure that's, if you're using the cloud, and put malicious websites behind the IP, and they're using your own domain in that scenario to direct people to a malicious site. And then threat intelligence sharing. This isn't as common as it could be. It's big in the financial sector, but for MSPs, it hasn't really taken off yet. But this is you'll see more in the financial sector and some retail and stuff like that, where if Bank of America gets hit with ransomware, they'll go and tell Citibank, and they'll tell everybody else, hey, we just got hit with this ransomware. Here's what it looks like. Be on the lookout for it. Really, the more we can help each other with sharing information like that, it really helps all of us defend our networks and helps defend against these threat actors. And then if you're doing web filtering, blocking newly registered domains and parked domains is a common thing you can do too, that really helps protect against this new infrastructure that the attackers are standing up trying to attack you. Next slide, please. All right, actually, you know what? We're going to jump into a demo here. So on the as we got into this here, we were talking about people calling your help desk, they're doing things like that. So one of the things I wanted to ask, or one of the things that we're going to demo here, is our ability to do verifying the identity of users when they call into your help desk. It's a great step you can take to help prevent attackers from using social engineering against your help desk and getting your employees to provide information or provide login credentials to the bad guys. So we'll let Miguel jump in, and he's going to show you folks how our product QVerify for identity verification works.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so basically from our dashboard here, from our CyberQP dashboard, we're able to see all of the end customers. So this is going to be able to, where we'll be able to essentially verify the user's identities, right? So we have a list of all of our customers here. Now, there's a couple of different things on this page that I want to point out. So starting with the verification of contact information. So most of these customers have verified their email, or they verified their phone number already. You'll notice that some of them have red phone numbers, or maybe they have grayed out emails. Those are the customers that we want to get fully verified. So there's two ways that we can actually go through this process. The first is we can actually send a welcome email to that customer. And essentially what that's going to do is going to have them kind of verify all their contact info, right? So they're going to be able to verify their email. They're going to be able to verify their phone number. And then once all of that gets verified, we also have the ability to set up a self-service portal for that same customer, right? So you'll notice there's a couple of different tools that we have off to the side here where we can verify user identity. We can even send password reset links and things like that. But the idea is that you're going to be managing all of this through your PSA, right? So I have a ticket here that's been created for one of our customers inside of ConnectWise, but just for context, we also integrate with Autotask PSA, and we also have Halo PSA on the roadmap as well. But essentially what will happen is you have this little hub here within your PSA where you have the same tools that you'll find within your dashboard. Now, ideally, we want to be able to verify each customer, right? And sometimes that can be a pretty lengthy process. Sometimes it can be a pain to go through all these steps to make sure, it doesn't matter if you've known your customer for, 15 years or 15 days, right? The idea is we want to be able to verify that you are talking to the person that, or that you think you know. So from this page here, I can simply click reset password. So if somebody calls and says, hey, I need to reset my password, how do I do that? I can go in and generate a new password for that customer. But obviously the first thing I want to do before I go through that step is actually verify that user. So with the identity verification process here, I can send a verification code to the customer. So I'm going to go ahead and hit send here. Now what's going to happen is through the self-service app, and I'll show you guys what this looks like on my mobile here. So you guys should be able to see the entire screen. So this is what it looks like from the customer's perspective. They're going to go ahead and verify with their biometrics, right? They're going to hit approve on their mobile device. They're going to give you a code, right? So in this case, 046148. And then we're just going to verify that within the PSA, right? We're going to make sure that it matches up. So in this case, we know that it matches up. and then I'm going to go ahead and hit approve within PSA, and now we can continue troubleshooting, right? So again, our goal here is to make sure that we are actually speaking to the person that says who they are. So that's just a little bit about the identity verification process there.
Awesome. Thanks, Miguel. Appreciate you guys showing that. And then we're going to jump into a poll question here. Jeff's going to kick it off for us. So this question is, do any of you out there that are on the call today, do any of you have a way to effectively verify end users when they call your help desk? Sometimes it's a manual process, sometimes it's a tool. I know we probably have some partners on the line, so hopefully they're all using it. But it'd be great to get an idea of what folks are doing.
All right, so we're looking at this. It's looking at about, still have them coming in. It's about 30% say yes, they do. About 70% say no, we know all of our customers.
Great. Yeah, I know this is definitely something that's up and coming. We see it a lot in the healthcare space. HHS had a notification going out recently on this one. So I think it's something that over the next few years, we're going to see it become part of some of these HIPAA standards and other things out there. So other compliance frameworks that are requiring folks to do this identity verification, just because it's becoming such a common attack technique for the threat actors out there. All right, awesome. So we'll jump into it. So the next phase of the attack when they're coming after you is the initial access. Initial access is when they're getting onto your network. They're just getting that initial, maybe they're cracking a credential, exploiting a vulnerability. So here's some common techniques they're doing. I just talked about exploiting vulnerabilities, tricking folks to put their credentials into one of these phishing websites. Going back to the evil jinx thing, you can, on the left-hand side here, that spot that says cookies where the cursor is, that's actually the evil jinx server collecting the session cookie of someone who clicked on that link. So even if you have multi-factor authentication set up, they can take that session cookie and they can use it to impersonate you and access your account. So phishing awareness and making sure you're not giving too many privileges to folks the people's daily drivers is important here. Sometimes they'll also acquire leaked credentials, right? So there's lots of websites out there. They can also go to credential brokers out in the dark web and they can purchase credentials. So they'll do searches, find your email domains, and they'll try to acquire credentials for your folks on the dark web as well. And sometimes people leak them. Sometimes people put them into code, or they've got them in different places where they shouldn't be, and people gain access that way as well. So in the next slide, we're going to jump in on how you can defend against those techniques, right? So phishing resistant MFA is important. Not all MFA is created equal. So you folks could take a look out on the internet. There's some great write-ups on phishing resistant MFA, and you know, something like SMS isn't phishing resistant, where something like Microsoft Authenticator with the number match would be phishing resistant. Or our just-in-time account access is phishing resistant because we do the same type of thing with the number match. Regularly patch and update systems as well. A lot of times these folks are relying on old scripts, and so they can exploit old vulnerabilities that are out there. Knowing your external access points and making sure they're secure. You know, make sure our RDP is closed. Make sure if you're running any sort of your RMM software, other things, that they're configured properly and they're really locked down, making it harder for threat actors to access those environments. And then implement good account management, right? Remove unused accounts, disable privileged accounts when you don't need them, rotate passwords, roles-based access controls, another big one. So I'm just trying to find my spot here. And then never using your daily driver, like I already mentioned, right? Don't use your daily driver for a privileged account. You don't want to have the account that you're using to browse the web and browse email be the same account that you're using to have domain admin access, because it just makes it easier for that credential to get phished. I think after this one, we're going to dive into another demo, right, Miguel, and talk about account discovery and how helping you guys understand how to remove those unused accounts, discover what accounts are out there. So I'll let Miguel jump into it.
Yeah, so I'm just going to jump back to the dashboard here. So you guys should be seeing the administrator accounts page. So as Brian was just saying, this is essentially we're going to be able to manage all of your admin accounts from. So just from an integration perspective, we're pulling this information from a couple of different sources, right? So we can integrate or pull from Active Directory, I should say. We can pull from M365, and we can also do local accounts as well. Now, the Active Directory and the local accounts just needed an app or an agent that gets installed on the machine that you're planning on pulling these contacts from. And then for 365, we have an enterprise app that we use to sync up those administrator accounts as well. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick refresh here. So guys, give me 1 second. There you go. All right. So I'm going to go into add accounts here. I'm going to go into Active Directory. Now, these are just some options that you can enable when you're going through the implementation process. I'm just going to go ahead and skip over those for now. But the idea is that once you've gone ahead and set up the app or set up the agent, you can pull from your OUs and you can also pull from your security groups, right? So if there's a specific group or a specific OU that you want to ingest into the dashboard, you can go ahead and select those groups. Once those groups have actually gone ahead and been imported into our dashboard, they're going to pop up under your administrator accounts here. Now, similar to our customers page, you're going to be able to see the integrations that you have set up. So if we're integrating with IT Glue, if we're rotating passwords, right, those passwords will also be updated within IT Glue. We can see when the password was last rotated, when the next rotation is scheduled for, again, the source of that admin account, and then just some general information such as, whether it was matched to CyberQP, or as you can see here, how much time until that password actually expires, right? So down here under the admin rotation schedule, this is where you would set up the rotations for the admin passwords. So this is going to be done on a per client basis. So you would go in, choose the time zone that your customer is in, choose what time frame you want those passwords rotated on, and then you can also set up the frequency, right? So, just from a general best practice perspective, we're going to recommend that you rotate these passwords daily. Every customer has a different environment. Everyone has different, requirements that they need to adhere to. But again, our goal here is to make sure, that, if your information, basically gets out to the dark web, for example, that it's only going to be out there for 24 hours max, right? So we know that even if something was to get leaked or that information was to get out there, we know that the next day that password is going to be rotated and you won't have any worries there. So once I've gone ahead and set my schedule, I can do the same for services as well. So if I wanted to set up like a service rotation or a password rotation, for services or scheduled tasks, it's the same idea, right? So I can set a time zone, I can set the range for when that's going to be rotated or the time frame, and then how often we're going to rotate those scheduled tasks or services. Now, the nice part is that the CyberQP agent will actually auto restart the services as well. So there'll be no disruption on the customer side, right? They won't see any hiccups there as far as whatever services that they're using. And then you can choose the complexity of the passwords, right? So, we have 85 characters here as a complex password for the services. But again, you also have the option to use passphrases or, either 5 short words or 4 long words, again, depending on your preferences there. Now, again, from this dashboard, I do also have the ability to go in and disable accounts or delete accounts, right? So, let's say this, this AB site admin was an account that I don't need being rotated. I can turn off the auto rotate option here. So that way it doesn't actually get rotated. Or maybe if I don't need this in the this account having access at all, I can go ahead and disable it. Or if it's just, maybe it's a customer that came over from a different customer or a different account that I don't need within a dashboard, I can always go ahead and delete that account as well.
This is a great tool too, Miguel, not to cut in, but this is a great tool if you're onboarding a new customer, right? Like when you run this discovery, you'll see if whichever MSP was supporting them before you, maybe their accounts are still out there. Now you can disable them, you can delete them. If they've got a bunch of sprawl, right? There's a big mess out there, it really lets you clean it up. And then that rotate option, there's a manual rotate as well that you can do. So you can do that rotate now. You could also select multiple accounts and rotate now. So that gives you also the ability, if you've got a technician that leaves, or if you're worried that an account is compromised, just gives you a really easy way to rotate those credentials without having to touch a bunch of machines, especially because this covers local AD and Azure AD. So it's not, especially for those local accounts, right? Like you're not RDPing into 50 machines to change a password. You can do it once from here, which is great. Really saves time too when you're trying to contain that risk if you think you've been compromised.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was pretty much it for the password rotations.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it, Miguel. Great demo. The next phase as we're going through the slide deck here, is the execution phase. So on this one, it's really the attackers are trying to execute their payloads on your endpoints. I'm not a huge fan of the execution phase, the way that MITRE's defined it, because it kind of could go into almost any phase of the attack framework. But as we jump in here, I'll give you some examples of what the attackers do, and we'll talk about ways to defend against it. Here's a couple tactics they'll use. Sometimes they're trying to gain access to one of your machines just to make it part of their botnet frame, or their botnet group, which is just a bunch of machines they're using to attack other machines. Sometimes they want to get malware on there, so then they can see what to steal, kind of take control of those machines over time. And then obviously we're all aware of ransomware. It's a common technique these attackers are using to try to get money. Sometimes they just want to run scripts and tools to exfiltrate data, get more information about your network, your company. And then they'll do network discovery as well, because when we're talking about ransomware, the more machines they can impact, the more that payout tends to be if they're ransoming you. And then they'll also do a file share crawler a lot of times to try to see if there's any files that maybe have passwords in them, or files that are sensitive that they can steal, that they think you'd be willing to pay to keep quiet or to get back. So what are some techniques you can do to kind of defend against this? As you can see with this too, I just want to point out, like, we're trying to give you guys all of the tools, not just what we do. A lot of what we do does help you against these tactics, but we're also trying to give you guys a good idea of what controls to implement outside of CyberQP that'll help you defend against these attacks. So the first one is kind of what Miguel was just mentioning, right? Like, manage and monitor your privileged accounts and access. So make sure you know what accounts are out there. You're limiting those accounts. People only have privileged access when they need it. And then monitor for new privileged access getting added. That's a common technique they'll use if they get on a host. Maybe they'll make another account, which we'll get into on one of these steps as we move forward. Behavioral monitoring, right? Like some of the more modern EDRs or some of the MDR vendors out there look for certain behaviors. So they'll say, hey, Brian normally logs into machines at this time, but he's logging in at a different time, or these files never run, right? Like using some of that machine learning, that AI to baseline what normal looks like and look for deviations from normal is a great way to monitor an environment for an attacker. And then application whitelisting is really the strictest way to prevent bad guys from or threat actors from living off the land and using your environment against you and executing payloads. But obviously that one's also difficult to manage depending on what vendor just in general. But that prevents any unauthorized programs from running at all. All right, so like I said on this one, it's a little weird because it could go for, getting that initial access or establishing a foothold or persistence or execution or whatever, like all those different phases we showed you in the beginning of the slide deck. But for this one, I think for us, when we're talking about privileged access management today, it's really about having zero standing privileges for your technicians whenever possible, right? Not having those shared admin accounts present. Those are the most taken advantage of the most by far by these threat actors. I've seen lots of different ransomware attacks, and every ransomware attack, actually, now that I'm thinking about that, I've seen they're trying to grab that shared admin credential so they can then spread to other hosts and try to get the biggest impact they can to get the biggest payday they can. So not having technicians use a shared admin account really helps limit that or makes it a lot harder for the attackers to establish that ransomware attack across multiple machines. And then moving target defense is another big one, right? Like, this is big business a lot of times. So the people that are attacking you, it's not like someone pounding away at a coffee shop trying to hack stuff. It's typically organized crime that's coming after you when it comes to ransomware, which is one of the most common threats that you'll see. And they're actually, it's staged kind of like you have, right? They've got level 1s, they've got level 2s, they've got different skilled people. One person's job might just be landing the hook, right? Like, they want to get access to a machine. Once they get access to that machine, they're taking their ticket and they're putting it in the queue for the level 2s to go and execute the ransomware, or do further network discovery. So back to that rotating the passwords Miguel was talking about, being able to rotate your passwords every day really helps reduce that risk. If someone gains access to a host, they dump your memory and they're stealing that access, they're not able to use those credentials if they're rotating every day, because they would literally have to steal them that day and use them that day, and then the next day those credentials would be changing. So it makes their job a lot harder and makes you less susceptible to those type of attacks. Especially when you're looking at that hierarchy, if it's a big threat group that's targeting you, they're typically not getting on your machine and executing the ransomware the same day that they landed on that host. Typically, they're landing on the host, they're kind of getting the lay of the land, and then sometimes they're on there for weeks or months before they execute the ransomware. So rotating those passwords and limiting the accounts that they can take over is really important. So we'll jump into persistence on the next one here, and that'll help us kind of that should help us talk through or show the how these attackers are not just getting on your network but staying on your network. So this is how they establish a lasting presence on your network. A lot of times they don't want to be, they need to make sure that if you found them and you block the initial way they got in, they have another way to hop in there. So on the next slide here, we're going to show a couple of those tactics that are used. At the top of the screen here, you can see this is just a scheduled task. They're setting up a fake scheduled task, and they're using that scheduled task to reestablish that connection every day. So their ransomware will run, or their malware runs every day, giving them that backdoor back into your network. So you might wipe out the way they got in, but they've got a secondary way to get access. Another thing they'll do is they'll install other software. So sometimes it's malicious software, like you can see here, where it's a purpose-built payload to get a backdoor. Other times it's going to be RMM tools, remote desktop tools they'll use. You'll see them use TeamViewer, you'll see them use other tools to hopefully, that they're hoping that you'll look at that and you'll think that it's just one of your tools or something, and you're not going to think it's a big deal. But a lot of times they'll use those RMM tools or remote desktop tools to keep persistence on a host as well. They'll make registry changes to make sure things happen on startups. A lot of times the scheduled tasks, the registry changes, all that's just trying to get something that runs every day and reestablishes their presence on the host in case they get cleaned off of it. So how do you defend yourself against this? There's a couple ways you can do that. We talked about some of the things they do. One of them is, like, if they've got access to one privileged account, they'll create another one. So after this little section here, I'm going to have Miguel jump in. He's going to show you folks how we can monitor for people getting added to privileged groups, because that's a very common thing that attackers do to establish persistence on a network. They'll gain access to one domain admin. They'll create a second domain admin in case you realize they're on that one, or if you're rotating that password, then they want to make sure that they have an account that they can always access. So a common technique is they're going to create a new account that's got privileges. And like I said, Miguel, after this slide, is going to jump into a demo to kind of show you guys how we monitor for that to help you defend against that technique. Another thing you can do is limit local admin. A lot of times they're using local administrator rights to build these scheduled tasks, to edit the registry, to make things start up, and to execute their different payloads, to even just to install some of these RMM tools or these remote tools. They need that local admin. So limiting local admin really helps make it harder for them to establish persistence on a host. And then obviously endpoint management as well, right? Like we talked about these RMM tools. If you know you use a specific RMM tool, block the rest of them from running with your EDR tool. Monitor for startup configuration changes. A lot of EDR tools do this natively. And then if you do have network monitoring in place, you can look for command and control traffic. So that's their tool beaconing out, or their tool establishing that connection to build persistence of the attack. All right, Miguel. So I'm going to hand it off to you. You can jump in and show folks how we help them monitor for these privilege changes that the attackers use for persistence.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm going to jump back into my handy dandy dashboard again, and we're going to jump back into the admin account. So, we talked a little bit about just, preventative measures, right, that we can take to ensure that, people that are not supposed to have access to our environment don't have access to it. So one of the nice things about QGuard from CyberQP is that we will alert you to any new accounts or any new admins that have been added to the dashboard, right? So if I'm going through my admins here and I'm doing my daily check-in to see, that everything looks good, and I come across, I don't know, evil nefarious person here, right? I know that this account is not supposed to be here. I know that this account was created by somebody who's not part of the organization, right? So what I can do is I can actually go in and I can disable that account, right? So that account no longer has access to anything on that domain or on that environment, and it can't make any changes. Now, on top of the fact that I can go ahead and disable this account, we're also going to alert you to the fact that this account was actually created, right? So we'll send out an email alert showing that a privileged account was actually created and added to the domain. So if you don't see it when logging into the dashboard, we're going to go ahead and send you a notification showing you all of the groups that that domain user or that admin was added to within the organization.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Miguel. I mean, and that's a huge red flag for you. If you're using our tool, you see this come up and you're like, hey, obviously the threat actors aren't going to name the account evil nefarious person we did for this demo. Obvious, but you'll know which accounts are yours and which accounts aren't yours. So if you see something pop up that says domain admin just got added, that should be a big red flag to you that someone's trying to establish persistence and attack your network. So in the next one, we're going to jump into privilege escalation defense. So in privilege escalation, this is where an attacker, like we mentioned earlier, right? If they get on your network, they're on a host, even if that host has local admin, that doesn't help them spread to other hosts, right? So one of the most common tactics they're going to do is they're going to, as we'll jump into the next phase, or the next slide here, is they're going to run a tool like Mimikatz, and they're going to jump on that machine. As you can see here, the script that's running next to it, it's dumping all of the password hashes for anyone that's logged into that account, because in Microsoft, all those accounts get stored in memory. And there's Mimikatz equivalent on most operating systems, but really what it is they're looking and saying, hey, anyone that's logged into this host, those credentials are in memory. I'm going to steal those credentials out of memory and try to find an account that has more access than the account that I'm using today. Another thing they'll do, sometimes they'll look at those scheduled tasks. Sometimes those passwords are hard-coded there. Maybe you've got a script that was running on the machine, or someone put them on the machine at some point to do some work. Sometimes you're hard-coding credentials into those scripts, right? So they're really just doing reconnaissance, trying to find those persistent admin accounts that they can grab and take advantage of, because their end goal is to spread to as many machines on that network as they can to maximize the payout if they're doing a ransomware attack or any kind of attack, really. So back to those misconfigured services, if you're hard coding credentials in there, that's a risk. And then credential dumping is really the most common. You see it on almost every single attack. Right before they execute, they're dumping credentials. They're finding those shared admin accounts that you're using to support your partners or your customers, and they're using those shared admin accounts against you. Even back in the day, there was some folks would use the same privileged account on all of their customers. So every customer would be like MSP1 admin with the same password on every customer. the attackers got smart to that and they used that to pivot. So like some of those early ransomware attacks you saw where it impacted a lot of customers for one MSP, a lot of times that was them using a shared account like that to pivot across their customer base. So in the next slide here, we're going to jump into how you defend against that. So there's a couple things you can do. Endpoint protection, obviously monitoring for that credential dumping. They're pretty smart with it now, so there is lots of ways to circumvent your endpoint detection and still dump those credentials. Rotating the passwords for your service accounts and your break glass accounts, like we already showed and talked through. Monitoring for those privileged account changes, which we also just showed you. The next two bullets here on the top are the ones that Miguel's going to demonstrate next for you guys. It's zero standing privilege and following the principle of least privilege, right? So one of the biggest things here at CyberQP that we want to help you with is limiting your attack surface and making it harder for those attackers to find accounts that they can exploit. So Miguel's going to jump into our just-in-time and our passwordless solution, which makes it so you can give technicians named accounts to access your customers. Those named accounts are only used for this admin access. You can control what level of administration you want to give those technicians, depending on what they're trying to do and what their role is. And that access only lives for a short period of time. So the technician account doesn't just sit on that host waiting to be attacked. It's only active with the permissions on it while it's in use. And those permissions are stripped off and the account's disabled. And after we're done, and we rotate that password after the attack. I mean, after the technician is done using the just-in-time account. So Miguel's going to kind of show you how this works. We designed it to be phishing resistant. We also designed it with what attackers do to violate these privileged accounts in mind. So go ahead, Miguel.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so we're going to jump back into our dashboard again, and here under the settings tab, we're going to scroll down to just-in-time accounts, and we're going to click into new policy here. And this policy is going to adhere to wherever you've imported your admin accounts from. So if it's Active Directory, 365, or local, you're going to choose that source. And then from here, we can actually set specific parameters around these just-in-time accounts, right? So the first thing is you're going to want to create a policy name, and then you can also restrict these accounts to, primary and super roles, or you can also restrict them to specific technician groups, right? So if you've created a technician group to give certain techs within your organization access to these systems or to these environments, you can also restrict it there. And then you can set a duration for how long you want these techs to have access to that system, right? So you can go anywhere from an hour of time all the way up to 30 days. The less time, the better, right? Again, the goal is to provide least standing or zero standing privilege for those types of environments. So 30 days is probably a stretch, but you want to keep it as minimal as you possibly can, right? So what this actually looks like from the text perspective.
Before you jump into that too, yeah. Miguel, on the privileged groups, the way we designed it here, where you can create these policies, we did it in a way where you can create policies based on what your technician's job is, right? So instead of just giving everybody domain admin all the time or global admin in Azure AD, you can see some of the roles that Miguel has set up here, right? Like you can still have domain admin, but let's say they're just making a DNS change, right? You can add the network admin group and you can make a DNS change policy that you apply to one group of techs, where another group of techs might just need to be workstation admins. Maybe they're only fixing workstations. You don't want them to be domain admins. Maybe someone's just changing group policy, right? Like we tried to give you the flexibility where you can create policies based on what that technician's job is and what they're trying to do at that point in time. And then you can assign groups and policies to those technicians and start training your technicians to only grab the policy when they're creating the just-in-time account for what they need in that scenario. If they're only fixing a workstation, using domain admin opens up risk, right? If they're only doing network administration, like adding DNS entries, they don't need full domain admin. So we really tried to make it in a way that makes it easy for you to do least privilege across all of your customers and not have to worry about having these overprivileged accounts floating around out there.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to provide some granularity there in terms of access. So what this will look like within your portal, you can see all of your accounts that have been either created or that are currently active or disabled for that matter. Now, when you go into your main dashboard for your admins, So I'm going to just jump into our environment here. And then down below, I'm going to click just-in-time accounts. I can see that these are the just-in-time accounts that are, tied to our specific demo environment and this particular customer. And then I can activate the account through the dashboard. And then I also have the ability to create or add the account through the QTech app, right? So that's our mobile app for technicians, right? So you can also create the app through that, or create the login, I should say, through the app. And then you would go ahead and create that account. You would set up a policy or adhere that tech to a specific policy. And then you always have to have a reason for why you're creating this account, right? So in this case, I'm just going to put test, and then I can pick a duration for how long I want this tech to have access to that environment. And then I'll go ahead and activate that account. No, what this actually, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say, and as you can see on that screen there, it's using a named account, right? So we're not using a shared account in the back end to give them temporary access. We're not using, some local account and bumping and like just giving Miguel a password to that. We're creating a named account for the user, giving them that access temporarily and then removing it. So this helps you with compliance a lot. There's a lot of compliance frameworks out there that require the use of named accounts. And it also helps you with incident response, right? You don't have to, even though we have all the logs in here for who was using privileged accounts and when they were using privileged accounts, you don't have to rely on our logs to do your investigation. If you're looking at an endpoint, you're going to see Miguel's admin account doing the activity, and it helps you look at the Windows event log to see what happened and who was doing it. You don't have to go and look and say, hey, this just-in-time shared account was used at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, and now I've got to go and look and see in CyberQP who checked the account out at that time. It's a named account every time, so it really helps make sure you know who's doing that access, and makes it much easier to investigate and keeps you in compliance with the rules and regulations that require named accounts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so what this will look like on the server side. So when you install the app, it's actually going to create a separate login down below. So you'll see the technician sign in here. And then from here, I can throw my email address in. Right, so I'm just going to type in my email address. This is going to match up to the mobile device, right? So I talked about the app a second ago, right? So this is going to pop up within the mobile app. And then I'm going to go ahead and match the code that's on the screen. And then I'm going to approve that login. Now this will log me into the system, and then I can go in and I can do whatever troubleshooting or password resets or whatever it is that I'm going into the system to do. Now, once I'm done, right, let's say time runs out and I still haven't finished whatever it is that I was working on, it's going to go ahead and disable my access. And now I won't have access to do anything within that particular machine. The other option is if I'm using the mobile app, right, you guys can see here, there's an option to disable the account. If I hit disable account, this will actually boot me from the machine, right? So this is going to boot me from the machine. And as Brian mentioned just a second ago, it's also going to rotate the password for that admin account. So I can't just log back into the system with the same password or credentials that I was using just a second ago. So the idea again here is we're going to provide that zero standing privilege to these systems, and we're able to manage this through either the mobile app or through the dashboard, as we just saw a second ago.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's one of those rare situations too with what Miguel's showing here, where like it's easier for a technician to do this than to go look up a password in your documentation tool or in a password vault, find the password for that customer, and then copy and paste it over to use it. Or if they're sitting in front of a machine manually typing it in, it is much quicker to just use this just-in-time account. You put your email address in, you verify the numbers, you press your thumb on the screen, and you're good to go. So we get a lot of positive feedback from folks that it's saving them, 90% of the time it typically took for someone to log into a machine to work on it. Awesome. All right, so that pretty much wraps it up. So as far as the summary goes here, I know we've got some questions that we'll jump into next, but really, not to stick to the theme too much here, is apply the wisdom from this book, right? Like all those tactics that we talked about in the beginning is something that attackers still use today. And really the biggest thing is don't wait to make improvements. Perfection's the enemy of progress, right? So start improving your privileged access now, right? Like book a demo, start cleaning up accounts, do whatever you got to do, but start managing these privileged accounts, because it is the most common way that attackers are going to gain access to your systems and impact your business. So next, I think we're going to jump into Q&A next, Miguel or Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a few questions that are out here. Make sure that you post them up to the Q&A. And I see that Jared posted here around booking a demo and receive 10% off CyberQP solutions. That's specific there. And we've got the QR code. I'm going to launch a poll here. Just how interested are you in learning more about CyberQP? And so as I get into questions, learning more about CyberQP, go ahead and just answer that in the poll question. That just helps us to be able to see how well we're doing with what we're presenting for you guys here. Post them up into the questions. I got a couple questions to kick this off, guys. First one, we use Password Boss for our password management. So if we had CyberQP and did password rotation, would we need to manually update our Password Boss every time the rotation happened?
You want to jump on that one, Miguel? Or you want me to cover it?
I'm sorry, I was looking at that.
It's all good. All right, so right now we integrate with IT Glue and Hoodoo for password syncing. We're obviously always looking at other options out there for integrations. We also have our own password vault. So if you are rotating passwords or you're using another vault, you can store your rotated credentials in our vault without having to buy another tool. So that's where it sits right now as far as the password vault or the Password Boss thing goes. And a lot of the different password vaults out there, they use different technologies, different APIs. Some are zero knowledge and other things. So some are more difficult to integrate with than others.
Cool. What about when a user isn't an admin, tries to install software that requires an admin account? Would my technicians have to remote in to do a just-in-time admin account each time? Or can we approve this from the CyberQP admin portal without having to log in?
So we're working on auto elevation. I'm assuming that's what they're asking us about elevation, right? So that is on the roadmap. I believe we're looking at that for later on this year, Brian. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think we were working on that for like Q4.
Yeah, we're definitely looking at the opportunity to, or like what it would take to elevate an end user. We've also had requests to elevate to trigger a just-in-time account from a UAC prompt. So that's another thing that we're looking at implementing sooner than later. But yeah, right now it's using the remote to log in there, or you can if it's a run as, you can do a run as and use the just-in-time account is what folks do today.
Oh, so just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, make sure that you just answer that quick one question poll question that's up there. I'll leave that up for a couple more minutes here as we finish up the questions. Question that came in, I'm going to slightly verify or change this a little bit, but one is that how's your overall pricing work? Like what's the pricing structure? The specific question here was how much does Q-Verify plan cost?
Yeah. So we price per technician, right? We don't want you to have to choose which customers you're deploying to. So it's priced per technician. It's and it's very competitive. I don't know the exact pricing because I'm not on the sales side of things, but if you click that link and you book a demo, whoever you book that demo with would obviously know the pricing.
Yeah, and a lot of this too, guys, is that if you do put that there, I know there's I love the product, want to sign up now. I like what I'm seeing, would like to get more information. If you're not sure with that, you got the QR code that's on the screen. You can do it that way just to get right there to be able to book a demo. Also, if you just select any of those first couple options there, the CyberQP team will reach out to you and get you your questions answered, get a demo set up with you as well on that. Question that came in the chat, would this work for Jump Cloud, which manages local users?
I'm not sure on that one, Miguel.
I don't think so. Yeah, that's not something we currently support.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh, wait. We'll just post one up here. Could you send a link as I'm watching on a mobile device Yeah, we'll make sure that we get that out there. I'll talk with Carly on our team to make sure on that link. Jared, I know you're out there. If you don't have the link already to Carly, can you make sure that she's got that so she can send it out with the recording as well? Cool.
Yeah, well, we appreciate everybody attending. I know we try to keep it lively, but it's always challenging. So
Yeah, no, great stuff with it, guys. You know, a lot of being able to learn from, always just being able to see from an education standpoint of all the crazy stuff that's going on out there, especially when I see things like that, being able to spoof. And maybe this is just me, maybe everyone else already knew about it, but being able to spoof when you got things like the Microsoft 365 with the unique look and feel behind the scenes that was created to make it harder to spoof, but
yep, it's crazy. They'll pass you right through to the log. They pass you right through too. So they take your credentials on those phishing screens. They'll pass you to your mailbox or whatever you're trying to get to. So half the time people don't even realize that their credentials were just stolen.
Yeah, crazy stuff.
Yep.
All right, excellent. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate you here on today's call, and for everyone else, this will end today's webinar. Look forward to seeing you the next MSP Success webinar. Thanks all.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.